Hello, welcome to An Abundance of Books. My name is Julia, and welcome to the Zelda vlog. We have a co-producer today because she won't shut up. I am bringing you this intro after I have finished all of the books in this vlog to say that I am not a video game content creator. I definitely played a lot of Zelda this month, and I did a lot of audiobooking while playing Zelda, but I found it difficult to incorporate that into the content. So most of what you're going to be seeing here is just a regular vlog with sprinkles of video game mentions throughout. Because of that, it might be a little weird and confusing. I might be popping in and out, so might she. But I definitely had some wins in this, so I still want to get it out. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. If you can see up there on the dresser, oh, it's Fiona's bed. And sorry, it was spooky. And she likes sleeping up there, so we finally put a little bed up there. I don't know if she necessarily likes it, but she's a happy kitty. Yeah, that's a happy kitty. I'm here to talk about 1984 by George Orwell. You have to move. This is so unprofessional. I haven't actually looked at the graphic novel at all. What? You're in my way. No! I haven't actually looked at the graphic novel at all, but I thought it would be a good way to refresh my memory on things, because I do think that this is a very good book to do on audio, but I'm definitely not paying as much attention as I should, and it's caught me up a couple times. So yeah, 1984. It's really good. I really, really like it. I think that, especially in this beginning part, there hasn't been any plot. So it's a lot of just our main character, Winston, sort of explaining what the world is like. And my absolute favorite part, well, not my favorite part, but the thing that got me is the one thing that I know about this is that it's called 1984 because it was written in the 40s or 50s, 49, and it's predicting what 1984 is like. And my favorite thing is it starts and Winston says, it's probably 1984. No one actually knows for sure. Like, that's how dystopian it gets, that they don't even know what year it is. It is definitely weird because you can easily relate it to real world things. I was talking with my husband about it because he'd read it, and he said he very much related it to Russia. Was very much the vibe. It's obviously communism coded, which I really thought I would have a problem with because I hated Fahrenheit 451 because I thought that it was very preachy and very like old man being like, kids these days. And I thought that I would have the same problem with this being like, oh, the commies are coming for us is sort of the idea, but it doesn't read that way because it feels so applicable to so many things. The thing I keep coming back to with this is religion, because the big ideas with this are the thought police. That's definitely a big theme in Christianity. And also their big refrain is the three-part thing: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Those are all definitely things that I learned in church. They wouldn't say it like that, but was sort of the idea. So anyway, the story just opens with Winston going about his day. He works at the Ministry of Truth. Does he work at the Ministry of Truth? I think so. Where he will update records so that history will reflect that Big Brother predicted things, or that companies are doing better than they said they did. He gave an example of boots, where they said they were going to make 100,000 boots. They actually only ended up making 60, but the record now reflects 50 to say that they overjumped their target. It's all very interesting. And so it's him being very unsatisfied with his life and his environment and not really having any friends and hating women. I'm hoping that that turns around and isn't just an of the time thing. I hope that it actually means something, because he wants to have sex with or kill every woman that he comes across. So that's cool. But I just think that it's so fun, and it is so accessible. For something being written in 1949, you don't miss a beat reading it. It reads like it was written this year. It is definitely lengthy and wordy, which I think is why it works so well for an audiobook. So I finished part 1, and it looks like that's where some plot is going to start happening. Not the plot isn't happening, but it's more like sowing seeds of doubt. And especially when Winston doesn't really have anyone else. He doesn't have friends, he doesn't have family. It's hard to build that world. I'm having a great time. This is a really good. Did you guys know that 1984 is actually good? I finished part 2 of 1984 and it's still so good. It's a very strange book to talk about because there's very little plot. There definitely is some stuff happening. There's a lady character and I have very confused feelings as to whether there's something up with her or whether this is just a case of men writing women, because it definitely feels that way a lot of the time. And Winston's attitude and behavior toward her is also not always good, but I think that that's more of a commentary on like how women are perceived and treated rather than a fault on the book. I'm very curious to see where it goes, but the majority of this section, maybe not majority, but a lot of it was taken up by this manifesto written by somebody who is against the party, and Winston gets his hands on it, and it is the most relevant piece of documentation I think I've ever heard. You could teach this manifesto in a class today and it would make just as much sense. It's absolutely wild how many things are relevant, how many things I've heard before said in different ways. It's a chicken and egg sometimes, knowing if like this idea came out of 1984 or if 1984 predicted the future. And it just has so many interesting things to say. One of the big things that they do is rewrite history, remove any evidence that something that the party predicted didn't happen, so they have to rewrite it. And it was saying like that causes us to live in a constant present, and the idea of education among people, and the idea that they only recently decided, well, not decided, but like discovered that history repeats itself because only recently have we been able to have the hindsight and the ability to examine what has happened in a meaningful way. That was just fascinating. It breaks down a couple of the party's statements, like war is peace, and sort of walks through the weird twisted logic of that, and it's like, it's awful, but like in a weird way it makes sense for the party's aims. There was a bit that was talking about there's always been 3 classes, the high class, middle class, and low class, and they have various names in various cultures throughout history. But the high class aim is always to remain high class, the middle class's aim is always to become high class, and the lower class is to survive. A change in leadership doesn't mean that much to the low class. They're still going to be doing what they're doing. It's incredibly relevant, and I love it so much. I do regret not having a physical copy to highlight. I'm definitely going to go out and buy one after this because it's incredible. If you are politically minded at all and haven't read 1984, it articulates so many things that I want to articulate and does it incredibly well. And there's also a hint, right at the end, a hint of plot happening. So I'm excited to see what happens in this last 30% because it really could go anywhere. I really don't know. I'm going to assume that 1984 is not meant to end on a happy note, but I'm excited to see I don't know. This book surprises me at every turn. I'm excited to see what it throws at me next. So, 1984. Yeah, it's pretty good. Hot take. 1984 is good, actually. The last part was definitely fitting, but a little bit difficult to read. I said in the last clip I didn't think this was going to end happily, but I was not prepared for the ending that we got. Some things happened that I was not anticipating, and I want to take this moment to recommend the audiobook because the narrator did such a good job and like had genuine terror flowing through me, and that was I want to say very exciting, but no, it was traumatizing. And I think that the audiobook is also good because this is a very plotless book. A lot of it is just people thinking about philosophy and economics and stuff like that, and I could see it being very dry to read, but when it's being told to you, it is just lovely. And I do want to give potentially mild spoilers for this, not really, in relation to the only woman in this story, Julia. I was hoping would be more of an interesting character, like that there was something she was hiding or something, but I think it was more a case of men writing women, which was definitely tough at times. There was definitely a moment, some stuff that was said that I did not enjoy, but I do think that it also provides good insight into Winston, because he sort of hates women, and I think that that is still interesting to read as a point of view of the character rather than the author. I think that there are definitely author things that you can infer there, but it certainly bothered me a lot less than a lot of more modern things that I've read. So yeah, 1984 is getting 5 stars. So surprised, but very happy. And I'm just amazed at how much I love this for a modern classic. Like, there are some that you really gel with and there's some that you really don't, and I'm glad that this is one that I really enjoyed. Immediately makes me want to reread Animal Farm too. I read that in high school and I don't think I've ever read it for fun, so that would be really interesting. Book number 2 done. This one, Barbarian Mine by Ruby Dickinson, the 4th book in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. We ended up going to the beach and I read like half of this there. It reads so fast, but going to the beach was lovely. It was a beautiful day for it. The contrast in wintry vibes was very fun. And this was good. The problem with this series for me is the first one is the best one, and like none of the rest of them have come close to it. But this one is about Harlow, who was missing at some point in the last book, and no one seemed very concerned about her, and that bothered me. But now we find out what happened, and her mate, Rook. He used to be a part of the tribe, but his dad basically said that they're bad people, and so they were self-exiled, I guess, and they lived on their own, and so he hasn't had any contact with the aliens or the humans. And it again features my favorite trope of trying to learn each other's language and stuff. And then there's some interesting things about his father and their family, as well as we do a little bit of traveling in here. We go to the ocean, which was very fun. And yeah, there's a lot to really like in this book. It just didn't grab me in quite the same way I was hoping for. Definitely better than the last one, but I'm gonna give number 4 stars. So the biggest issue with doing this vlog is that time has no meaning in Tears of the Kingdom. There's only the game, and you just live in it. It's Zelda's world, we're all just living in it. I know people have described it as a game of distractions, which is definitely true, but yeah, an 8-hour audiobook just kind of flies by. You can do like 2 things in that amount of time. So I ended up reading all of the Dead Romantics and didn't update you. That's what this big rambly bit is just to say. And I'm going to start off by saying, because this was a 5-star prediction, it was 4 stars. And I do think it was really good, and my understanding of the book being a ghostwriter who falls in love with a ghost is accurate but not true to the vibe. Dead Romantics is about our main character, Florence Day. Side note, I read a bunch of reviews of this and there were some choice words. Someone described the name Florence Day as millennial twee, and that's excellent. Florence Day is a romance ghostwriter for this very famous author. There's some very cute bookish things in it where her family doesn't know who she ghostwrites for, so her brother will keep being like, and how's Stephanie Meyer doing? How's Jasmine Guillory doing? Like, it's very cute, and lots of modern references too, some Casey McQuiston in there. Florence has been able to talk to ghosts ever since she was little. Her family runs a funeral home and they sort of grew up there, and she was always seen as a weird kid because of that. Anyway, she moved to New York City, is doing this job, and now she has to come home for reasons, and some stuff happens. Anyway, it's very much more a just women's fiction, coming of age, contemporary, connecting with your family in your small town. It actually reminds me a lot of Book Lovers in the way that like your setup for this should be so good, and then it becomes like a little generic. I don't know, I always side with the girl from New York City rather than the small town, but this especially had that low plot feeling of like, let's just go talk to a neighbor and do this and we'll help this small business, which I did like. I just didn't like as much of it. I also didn't like that it didn't lean, oh, there's a book back here. I also didn't enjoy that it didn't lean into the weirdness. Like, it was very scientific and unfun, like boring, just a fact of life that ghosts exist, where I wanted this to be more like a oops, I married Bigfoot, or you know, like one of those weird romance things. I wanted a touch of that, but like classier. And unfortunately that's not quite what I got. I think that it was good other than the love interest in this. A review also described him as a loaf of white bread LARPing as a love interest, which is just the best insult I've ever heard. So the romance was definitely lacking in it, and the family stuff was good, but then it gets distracted by the romance stuff, and it had a lot of components. 4 stars is good, just definitely not the 5-star for me. But I think if you enjoy still the concept of ghostwriter falls in love with a ghost, as long as you know that it doesn't lean weird or particularly fun, then I think that this is still a really good, really quality book. And I had a lovely time just sitting there, and oops, it's over. 2 updates for you today. The first, oops, I went to a bookstore and I bought myself a copy of 1984. They had so many different versions, but I liked this one best. Got a good flop to it. Some of them had like super skinny text, really wide margins. That was a choice. I guess this one does too, to an extent, but yeah, I'm very happy to have this, and I will go through it at some point in my life and annotate it. Second update is World War Z. I have not finished it, but I am darn close. I'm on the last part, or the part before the end part. And it's a tough book for me to get my head around. It has a lot in common with the last Max Brooks. The last Max Brooks that I read, Devolution, where it started and I was like, incredible, best book ever. It's fiction that's written like nonfiction, which is one of my favorite things ever, and the full cast is doing an incredible job. The world building on this is so cool, the concepts are so cool, and then by like the halfway point, I'm over it. I think probably the biggest portion of both of those is when you try to do horror, you can't sustain it for 300 pages, and so it kind of flips back and forth. But this one's also tough because Devolution was about this community who were isolated and they encounter Bigfoot basically. So it was everyone talking about the one event at the one place, and most of it was like neighbors who all knew each other and were sort of following a common story. This is all over the world, like actually the whole world, and it's very cool, but then it reads like a collection of short stories and you don't have a through line between most of these things. Sometimes they'll reference each other, like someone will make a report and they'll hear about it, or like zombies will be doing something in India and that affects how they respond in Australia, sort of thing. But for the most part, it's like at least 20 perspectives, all just kind of talking about how they handled the zombie wars. And of course, this being written in 2006, there are definitely some fun pandemic parallels of how things are the same, how things are different. But that's really only the very beginning, and the problem is a lot of this is like military talk, which I don't really care about. Actually, the last section that I read was the best. It was called Around the World and Above, and that featured more individual stories. The and above talks about the International Space Station and how they dealt with it, which was so cool. And then like got less cool when they started talking about Earth stuff, but whatever. And the other story that I really loved in that was about this guy in Japan who the zombies happen, and he's stuck on like the 20th floor of this apartment building or something. And so it's him systematically climbing down the building by the balconies and gathering supplies and like trying not to get caught and stuff, and being able to focus on one person doing one thing at one time was a rarity for this book, and definitely something that I really enjoyed because I'm sort of glazing over a lot of the military talk stuff. But this has a lot of really interesting things to say. There's a German guy in it who was talking about how after World War II, they have been drilled that your first duty is to your conscience, in that like these people weren't just following orders, like you owe responsibility for your actions, and how some people have learned that and some people haven't. There's also a bit about Cuba where they said you can't want freedom just for the sake of freedom. You have to want something and then fight for the freedom to get it. Lots of really good stuff in here, lots of really good quotable stuff. It's just a little bit too bogged down and too many perspectives. Like, we have gone back to maybe 2 people, so you don't make a connection with anybody, and it's good. It's just eh. And I think this is maybe where the 5-star system fails me. I signed up for Letterboxd recently. If this is just a tangent where now I'm trying to rate movies on a 5-star scale and it's impossible. So I've just sort of deluded myself over the years to convince myself that I do know how to rate books on a 5-star scale, and now I'm questioning my whole reality. All that to say, this is the kind of book where the 5-star scale fails me because I'm really happy that I've read and am reading this book, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to other people, but it's never going to be a perfect book. So if I rate it 3 stars, which is probably what it's going to be, that will lower the average rating and then de-incentivize people to read it, and it's a vicious cycle, but I'm going to keep doing it. I'm happy that I have a booktube to explain my thoughts a bit more thoroughly. The other thing that I really like about this is, so the audiobook is an absolutely stacked cast. Like, Mark Hamill, Nathan Fillion, Rob Reiner, like, it's a stacked audiobook cast, and I would definitely recommend doing the audiobook for it. And then, like, is doing an audiobook over a book, doesn't make a difference. Oh, I think I was starting this tangent to say that I like that. So the book is presented as interviews, so it's just this guy interviewing and then people talking for pages and pages. Like, there's very little to break it up, but the interviewer is the narrator. No, but the voice of the interviewer is the author, Max Brooks, which I think is so cool for him to be able to do that, and also just like lends this weird authenticity to it that I love. I'll finish this up tonight, I'm sure, and then we can wrap this thing up. I know this hair is like horrifying, but I kind of love it. It's very Cindy Lou Who on a bender, and if that doesn't describe me, what does? I did indeed end up finishing World War Z last night, and I'm gonna give it a 3. It feels, it's better than a 3. Should I just give it a 4 then? A 4 doesn't feel right, so I'm gonna stick with a 3, but I do highly recommend this book, especially if you're somebody who enjoys military type stuff. I think that this was really fun. It pulls on a lot of zombie stuff. This coming out in 2006 also is very interesting for where the zombie landscape has gone since then, and also pandemic stuff. I would really highly recommend this. Is it better than the last one? Like Devolution? No. Personally, no, but the quality is still there. It's just the personal enjoyment. Anyway, that being said, we finished 4 books in this. A very orange color palette altogether. I swear this game is giving me brain rot, because like, what did I rate this? I have no idea. It was only a couple days ago. I think we have a 3, 2 4s, and then a 5. This one I know is the 5. This was so much fun, and I am so happy to be the kind of person who can enjoy classics. It's nice to be reminded of that, because sometimes I feel like a fake reader because I don't like Jane Austen. But this was a very fun thing to do, and in the end, where are we in Tears of the Kingdom? We've both accomplished so much and yet so little, but I did get this beautiful shot of me and the gang rolling out. I'm nowhere near the end of the plot, I'm sure. That end fight is gonna take me a couple tries, I have no doubt. But it's so much fun, and I know that I sort of took a month off to do this, but I think it was a good idea for me, and hopefully I will focus up in July. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will be back in just a couple days, I'm sure, with the July announcement. So see you then. Bye-bye.